The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems, its desperate signal carrying the dying gasps of an entire civilization. On the mining world of Kepler, 442b, the Vorthak had been living peacefully for over 3 centuries, their crystalline cities gleaming under the soft light of their orange sun. They were a gentle species, standing barely 4 feet tall, with translucent skin that shimmered like morning dew. Their greatest achievement was not in warfare or conquest, but in their ability to sing crystals into perfect geometric formations that could store vast amounts of energy. But now their songs had turned to screams. The destroyers had come without warning. These mechanical monstrosities swept through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. They had no names, no culture, no purpose beyond destruction. They were simply hunger given form, converting entire worlds into raw materials for their ever-expanding fleet. The Vorthak had no weapons, no military, no concept of warfare. Their defensive systems were designed to protect against natural disasters, not against an enemy that could crack planets open like nuts. Elder Zephyria stood in the central command chamber of their capital city, her 6 arms trembling as she watched the orbital scanners. The destroyer fleet hung in space above them like a dark cloud, their massive ships blotting out the stars. The first bombardment had already begun, turning the outer settlements into molten glass. Her people were dying, and she had no way to save them. "Send the beacon again," she whispered to her communications officer, a young Vorthak named Melody whose skin had gone completely clear with terror. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Someone must hear us." "Elder, we've been broadcasting for 3 days," Melody replied, her voice barely audible. "No one has answered. The Galactic Council worlds are too far away, and the nearest military force belongs to the Keth Empire. They would take weeks to mobilize, even if they wanted to help." Zephyria closed all 6 of her eyes. The Keth were warriors, yes, but they were also isolationists who rarely intervened in the affairs of other species. The Galactic Council was a bureaucratic mess that would spend months debating whether to act. By then, there would be nothing left of her world but cosmic dust. "Keep broadcasting," she said firmly. "Even if we die, perhaps our warning will save others." The beacon continued its desperate cry. "This is Elder Zephyria of the Vorthak Republic on Kepler, 442b. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our defenses have failed. We have approximately 6 million souls remaining and no means of evacuation. Please, if anyone receives this transmission, remember us. Tell the galaxy what happened here." 3 star systems away, aboard the human exploration vessel Wanderer's Dream, Captain Sarah Chun was reviewing mining surveys when her communications officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, I'm picking up an emergency beacon. It's pretty desperate." Chun frowned. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years, ever since they developed faster than light travel. Most other species still viewed them as newcomers, barely worthy of notice. "Patch it through." The Vorthak's message filled the bridge, and Chun felt her blood turn cold. She'd never heard of the Vorthak, but the terror in the alien's voice was unmistakable. "Rodriguez, can you get a fix on that signal?" "Yes, ma'am. It's coming from the Kepler system, about 2 days away at maximum burn." "But, Captain," Rodriguez hesitated. "According to our databases, that system isn't under any military protection. If they're really under attack, we'd be going in alone." Chun finished his thought. She looked around her bridge at the 15 humans who made up her crew. They were explorers, not soldiers. Their ship was designed for long-range surveys, equipped with only basic defensive systems. Against whatever was attacking the Vorthak, they would be severely outgunned. But they were also human. "Nav, plot a course for the Kepler system. Engineering, I want maximum power to the engines. Communications, send a message to Fleet Command informing them of our intentions." Chen's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. "We're going to help them." Her first officer, Commander Torres, stepped close to her chair. "Sarah, we don't know what we're flying into. This could be a trap, or we could be facing an enemy we can't handle. We have a responsibility to our crew." Chen nodded. "You're right. But we also have a responsibility to help people who are crying for rescue. That's what humans do." She turned to address her entire crew. I won't order anyone to follow me into this. If you want to stay behind, now's the time to say so." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then, Rodriguez spoke up. "Ma'am, my grandmother used to tell stories about Earth's wars, about people who risked everything to help strangers. I'd like to think we haven't lost that part of ourselves just because we're in space now." One by one, every member of the crew voiced their agreement. Chief Engineer Patel, a woman who had lost her entire family in a mining accident and understood the desperation of waiting for rescue that might never come. Dr. Kim, whose medical oath compelled him to help anyone in need, regardless of species. Weapons Officer Jackson, a former military man who couldn't stand the thought of innocents being slaughtered while he had the power to act. "All right then," Chin said, settling back in her captain's chair. "Let's go save some aliens." The Wanderer's dream changed course, its engines burning bright against the cosmic darkness. Behind them, automated systems began transmitting their mission parameters to Earth Fleet Command. It would take weeks for any reinforcements to reach them, but Chin wasn't thinking about reinforcements. She was thinking about 6 million beings who were about to die unless someone did something about it. As they jumped to faster-than-light speed, none of them knew they were about to make first contact with one of the galaxy's deadliest enemies. None of them realized that humanity was about to announce its presence on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. They only knew that someone was crying for help, and humans didn't ignore cries for help. The beacon continued to broadcast across the void, its message now reaching different ears. In the depths of space, something stirred, something that had been watching and waiting. The destroyers had learned to expect certain responses to their attacks. Some species would flee, others would fight, and die quickly. A few would beg for mercy that would never come. But humans? The destroyers had never encountered humans before. They had no idea what was coming for them. Elder Zephyria stood in her crystal tower, watching the night sky burn as destroyer ships continued their systematic bombardment of her world's outer regions. Her people huddled in the deep caves beneath the cities, their songs silenced by terror. The shields were failing, power systems were overloading, and their most optimistic estimates gave them perhaps 2 more days before the final assault began. She had stopped hoping for rescue. Now she only hoped that their beacon might warn others, might give the galaxy some advance notice of the horror that was spreading from system to system like a cancer. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, help was coming. Not the measured response of a galactic military force, not the calculated intervention of a spacefaring empire, but something far more dangerous to the destroyers. Humanity was coming, and humanity was angry. The Wanderer's dream dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system, and Captain Chin immediately knew they were in trouble. The tactical display lit up with dozens of massive contacts, each one easily 10 times the size of her exploration vessel. The destroyer fleet hung around Kepler, 442b like vultures around a corpse, their dark ships absorbing light rather than reflecting it. "Jesus Christ," whispered Weapons Officer Jackson. "There must be 40 of them." Dr. Kim's hands shook as he studied the sensor readings. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy discharges on the planet's surface. They're systematically destroying everything. Cities, infrastructure, even the forests. It's not conquest, it's complete annihilation." Chin felt her stomach clench. Through the viewports, she could see the planet's surface glowing with fires that were visible from space. Entire continents were burning. "Communications, are we still receiving the Vorthack beacon?" "Yes, ma'am, but it's weaker." "And Captain," Rodriguez's voice broke slightly, "I'm picking up individual distress calls too. Families, children, they're all begging for someone to help them." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. 15 humans in a single small ship, facing an enemy force that had already begun exterminating millions of innocents. By every military doctrine, by every rule of engagement, they should retreat immediately and wait for proper reinforcements. Commander Torres approached Chin's chair again. "Sarah, we need to talk about this. Those ships could vaporize us before we even get close enough to fire a shot. We can't save the Vorthack by getting ourselves killed." Chin nodded slowly, but her eyes remained fixed on the tactical display. "You're right. We can't save them all." She paused, then straightened in her seat. "But maybe we can save some of them." Jackson, What's our weapons status? Jackson looked confused. Ma'am, we've got defensive pulse cannons and a small complement of kinetic torpedoes. Nothing that could scratch those monsters. I wasn't thinking about scratching them. Chen's voice had taken on a dangerous edge that her crew had never heard before. I was thinking about getting their attention. Patel, how much power can you route to the engines? Chief Engineer Patel's eyes widened as she began to understand what her captain was considering. If I strip power from everything except life support and weapons, I can give you about 30% over normal maximum. But, Captain, the engines won't take that kind of abuse for long. How long? Maybe 20 minutes before we start seeing cascade failures. Chen nodded. That'll have to be enough. Dr. Kim, what do we know about Vorthack biology? Can they survive in our atmosphere? According to the cultural databases, they're oxygen breathers like us, but they prefer lower gravity and higher humidity. Our ship could support maybe 50 of them for a few days. 50 out of 6 million. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. Then, she squared her shoulders and began issuing orders with calm precision. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to announce ourselves to those destroyer ships and make them mad enough to chase us. While they're focused on hunting us down, we're going to try to extract as many Vorthack as we can from the planet's surface. Torres stared at her. Sarah, that's suicide. Those ships will run us down in minutes. Not if we're smarter and faster than they are. Chen turned to her navigation officer. Ensign Walsh, I need you to plot me a course through that asteroid field on the system's edge. Something with lots of cover and tight spaces. Walsh's fingers flew over her controls. Ma'am, some of those passages are barely wider than our hull. At high speed, one miscalculation. I know, but those destroyer ships are huge. They'll have trouble following us through the tighter spots. Chen looked around at her crew. I know this is insane. I know we're probably all going to die. But, right now, we're the only thing standing between 6 million innocents and total extinction. So I'm asking each of you, are you willing to risk everything to save people we've never met? The response was immediate and unanimous. Every single member of the crew voiced their agreement without hesitation. Rodriguez actually laughed. Captain, my great-grandfather was at Normandy. He always said the only time you find out what you're really made of is when you have to choose between what's safe and what's right. Engineering, give me everything you've got, Chen ordered. Weapons, load all torpedo tubes, and charge the pulse cannons. Communications, open a channel to the lead destroyer vessel. The main screen flickered to life, showing the massive dark bulk of the nearest destroyer ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a mechanical voice spoke, its words translated by the ship's computer into flat, emotionless English. Unknown vessel. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Chen stood up and faced the screen. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Wanderer's Dream. You are committing genocide against the Vorthack people. Withdraw your forces immediately or we will engage you. There was a long pause. When the destroyer spoke again, there was something almost like amusement in its mechanical voice. You are one small ship against 47 combat vessels. You have no tactical advantage and no hope of victory. This is your final warning. Chen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. You're right about one thing. We don't have any hope of victory. She paused, letting that sink in. That makes us very, very dangerous. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All hands, battle stations. Execute Rescue Protocol Lazarus. The Wanderer's Dream suddenly accelerated to maximum burn, diving straight into the heart of the destroyer fleet. Jackson fired every torpedo they had at the lead ship, not trying to destroy it, but simply to get its attention. The explosions were like fireflies against the massive hull, but they served their purpose. 47 destroyer ships turned as one and began pursuing the tiny human vessel. Evasive maneuvers. Chen shouted, "Take us into the atmosphere." The Wanderer's Dream screamed through Kepler 442b's upper atmosphere, its hull glowing cherry red from friction. Behind them, energy beams lanced through the air where they had been moments before. The destroyer ships were faster than Chun had hoped, but they were also less maneuverable. There, Dr. Kim pointed to a cluster of buildings in a mountain valley. Massive life signs. It's one of their cities. Put us down in the central plaza, Chen ordered. We've got maybe 3 minutes before those ships catch up. The exploration vessel landed hard, its engines still screaming at maximum power. The cargo bay doors burst open, and Chen's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Any Vorthack who can hear this, we are here to rescue you. We have limited space, but we're taking everyone we can. Move now. The Vorthack who emerged from the crystal buildings were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Their translucent skin caught the light of their burning world, making them look like living glass sculptures. They moved with desperate speed, helping their young and elderly toward the human ship. Elder Zephyria was among them, her 6 arms clutching a data crystal containing her people's entire cultural history. She had never seen a human before, but she recognized the courage it took to land a ship in the middle of a war zone. "How many can you take?" she asked Commander Torres in broken galactic standard. 50, maybe 60 if we crowd them in, Torres replied, helping Vorthack civilians into the cargo hold. Zephyria's skin went pale. Around them, thousands of her people watched from the shadows, knowing they couldn't all be saved. "Take the young ones," she said firmly. "And these." She handed Torres several data crystals. "Our history, our science, our songs. If our people die, at least something of us will survive." "You're coming too," Torres said, grabbing the elder's arm. "No." Zephyria pulled away gently. "I will stay with those who cannot leave. It is my duty as their leader." On the bridge, Chen watched the tactical display as the destroyer ships closed in. "We've got company. 60 seconds to contact." The last of the young Vorthack were pushed aboard, their elders singing a haunting farewell song that made the human crew's eyes water. Torres sealed the cargo bay and ran for the bridge as the Wanderer's dream lifted off again. "Punch it," Chen shouted. The ship rocketed skyward just as the first destroyer beams struck the plaza where they had landed. The crystal city below them began to melt under the intense heat, but the humans were already breaking atmosphere, fleeing toward the asteroid field with their precious cargo of survivors. Behind them, Elder Zephyria and 10,000 of her people watched the human ship disappear into the stars. Then, they turned to face their destroyers with quiet dignity, their voices raised in one final song of defiance. The chase was just beginning, but something fundamental had changed. For the first time in their existence, the destroyers had encountered a species that would risk everything to save strangers. They had met humanity, and humanity had just declared war on genocide itself. The Wanderer's dream weaved through the asteroid field like a dancer fleeing death itself. Behind them, the destroyer fleet pursued with mechanical precision, their massive ships smashing through smaller asteroids rather than navigating around them. Captain Chen's gamble was working. The larger destroyer vessels were having trouble following them through the tighter passages, but it wasn't going to work forever. "Hull stress is approaching critical levels," Chief Engineer Patel reported, her voice tight with concentration. "And I'm seeing microfractures in the engine housing. We can't keep this up much longer." In the cargo hold, 63 young Vorthack huddled together, their translucent skin flickering with patterns of fear and confusion. Dr. Kim had rigged temporary environmental controls to keep them comfortable, but they were clearly traumatized by watching their world burn. Elder Zephyria's data crystals sat in a secured container nearby, representing all that remained of 3 centuries of Vorthack civilization. Chun gripped her command chair as the ship bucked through another violent turn. "Jackson, do we have any weapons left?" "Negative, Captain. We're down to harsh language and desperate prayers." "Then, we'd better make sure our prayers are louder than theirs." Chen studied the tactical display, searching for some miracle that could save them all. The destroyers had split their fleet, trying to surround the humans and cut off their escape routes. It was a brilliant tactical move, and it was going to work. Suddenly, Rodriguez straightened at his communication station. "Captain, I'm picking up something on the emergency frequencies. Multiple signals, coming from everywhere." "What do you mean, everywhere?" "Ma'am, there are ships dropping out of faster-than-light all around the system. I count 18, no, 24. Jesus, they're still coming." The tactical display exploded with new contacts. Ships were appearing from multiple directions, and they weren't all the same design. Chun recognized a few: a Keth battlecruiser, several Galactic Council patrol vessels, even what looked like a merchant convoy armed with improvised weapons. "This is Admiral Corinth of the Keth Fourth Fleet," a gruff voice announced over the communications system. "Human vessel Wanderer's Dream. We received your beacon relay from Earth Fleet Command. What's your status?" Chen's eyes widened. "Earth Fleet Command? We never—" "Captain," Rodriguez interrupted. "Our automated systems sent a full mission report when we changed course to help the Vorthack. It went to every human colony and relay station in the network. And apparently they shared it with everyone else," Commander Torres added with amazement. Another voice joined the channel, speaking in the musical tones of the Melodian species. "This is Harmonic Captain Serenity of the Crystal Song. We cannot allow such bravery to go unanswered. We stand with humanity." Hegemony Battleship Iron Will reporting, came a third voice, this one belonging to the usually isolationist Terran Defense League. "No one fights alone while we draw breath." Chun felt her throat close up with emotion. In the span of a few hours, her desperate rescue mission had somehow become a rallying cry that had reached across dozens of star systems. Species that rarely cooperated were working together, united by the simple human principle that innocent people deserved protection. But the destroyers weren't intimidated by numbers. The enemy fleet turned as one to face this new threat, their weapons charging with ominous energy. The lead destroyer broadcast on all frequencies. "You will withdraw immediately or share the fate of the Vorthack. This matter does not concern you." Admiral Corinth's response was immediate and fierce. "You're wrong about that. Making innocent people suffer concerns all of us. Surrender now, or we will teach you what justice looks like." The destroyer's reply came in the form of a massive energy beam that lanced across space toward the Keth battle cruiser. But Corinth was ready for it. His ship rolled aside and returned fire with plasma cannons that lit up the darkness like miniature suns. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Allied fleet attacked with desperate coordination, each species contributing their unique strengths to the fight. The Keth ships were heavily armed and armored, able to trade blows with the destroyers on nearly equal terms. The Melodian vessels used sonic weapons that disrupted the destroyers' targeting systems. The Galactic Council patrol ships worked in swarms, using their superior maneuverability to stay ahead of the enemy's massive weapons. But it was the humans who provided the wild card that tipped the balance. "Captain," Jackson said with growing excitement, "I'm analyzing the destroyer weapon patterns. They're incredibly powerful, but they're also predictable. They fire in sequence, always targeting the largest threat first." Chun saw the opportunity immediately. "All ships, this is Captain Chun. I have a tactical proposal. The destroyers prioritize targets by size and firepower. If we coordinate our attacks..." What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The larger Allied ships would present themselves as obvious targets, drawing the destroyers' fire, while smaller vessels like the Wanderer's Dream darted in to strike at vulnerable points. The humans had inadvertently taught the entire alliance how to fight like underdogs. The tide began to turn when Commander Torres made a crucial observation. "Captain, look at their formation. They're protecting something in the center of their fleet." Chun squinted at the tactical display. There, surrounded by the largest destroyer vessels, was a ship unlike the others. It was smaller, more angular, and covered in what looked like sensor arrays rather than weapons. "That's their command ship," she breathed. "Take out the command ship, and the rest become just very large paperweights," Admiral Corinth finished, having overheard the human transmission. "All ships, new target priority. We're going for their brain." The Alliance fleet regrouped and charged straight into the heart of the destroyer formation. It was a desperate gambit that cost them dearly. 3 ships were destroyed outright, and many others were badly damaged. But they broke through the defensive line and reached the command vessel. The Wanderer's Dream was among the first to engage the command ship, its small size allowing it to get close enough to target specific systems. Jackson fired their last pulse cannon burst directly into what looked like a communication array, and the effect was immediate. Across the entire destroyer fleet, the precise coordination that had made them so deadly began to break down. "Keep hitting it," Chun shouted. "Don't let it re-establish control." The command ship tried to retreat, but It was surrounded by angry allies from a dozen different species, all united by rage at what they had witnessed on the planet below. The destroyer's reign of terror in this system was about to end. But victory came at a terrible cost. As the last destroyer ship went dark, the Allied fleet turned their attention to Kepler 442b. The planet's surface was scarred beyond recognition, its crystal cities reduced to melted slag, its forests burned to ash. Of the 6 million Vorthak who had called this world home, only the 63 aboard the Wanderer's Dream had survived. Elder Zephyria's voice crackled over the communication system from one of the rescue ships that had picked up her transmission. She had somehow survived the final assault, along with a few hundred others who had hidden in the deepest caves. "Captain Chun," she said, her words heavy with grief and gratitude. "You kept your promise. You came when we called for rescue. My people will remember this for as long as we exist." Chun stared out at the ruined world and felt a mixture of pride and heartbreak. They had saved lives, yes, but they had also learned that sometimes being human meant carrying the weight of those you couldn't save. "Admiral Corinth," she said over the fleet channel, "what happens now?" The Keth commander's response surprised her. "Now, Captain Chun, we hunt down every last one of these destroyer fleets. Your species has shown us something we had forgotten. That courage is contagious. And that genocide is everyone's problem." Across the Alliance fleet, representatives of 24 species were already making plans. The destroyers had made a critical mistake when they had ignored humanity's rescue attempt. They had assumed that one small ship couldn't matter, that saving a few dozen lives couldn't change anything. They had just learned how wrong they were. Humanity had answered a cry for help, and, in doing so, had awakened something in the galaxy that had been sleeping for too long. The age of standing by while innocents suffered was over. The hunt for the destroyers was about to begin, and it would be led by the species that had taught everyone else what it meant to risk everything for strangers. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. What the news networks called the human effect had spread like wildfire across every civilized system. Species that had never spoken to each other were now sharing technology and tactics. Ancient enemies were working side by side, all because a small human ship had answered a desperate cry for help. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Retribution, a massive battlecruiser that Earth Fleet Command had rushed into production using technology freely shared by their new allies. The ship was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Keth armor plating, Melodian sensor arrays, human weapons systems, and Galactic Council communications gear all integrated into a single devastating platform. But the Retribution wasn't alone. Around her, a fleet of over 200 ships representing 37 different species maintained formation as they approached the destroyer's stronghold in the Vega system. Intelligence gathered from captured destroyer vessels had led them here, to what appeared to be the enemy's primary staging area. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Commander Martinez, who had transferred from the Wanderer's Dream along with most of Chin's original crew. "It's massive, Captain, reading as approximately 50 kilometers in length." Chin nodded grimly. They had been tracking destroyer forces across the galaxy for months, always arriving to find devastated worlds and the smoking remains of entire civilizations. But this was different. This was their chance to strike at the source. "Admiral Corinth, are you seeing this?" Chun asked over the fleet communication channel. "Indeed," came the Keth commander's gravelly response from his flagship. "That appears to be their construction facility. Intelligence estimates suggest they can build a dozen new destroyer ships every month from that platform." Elder Zephyria's voice joined the conversation from the New Harmony, the refugee ship that had become home to the surviving Vorthak. "Captain Chun, my people's analysis of the destroyer technology suggests that facility is also their central command nexus. Destroy it, and you cripple their entire network." The plan was ambitious in its simplicity. The Allied fleet would assault the facility directly, while smaller strike teams infiltrated it to plant nuclear charges at key structural points. It was dangerous, potentially suicidal, but it was also their best chance to end the destroyer threat permanently. "All ships, this is Admiral Corinth. We've run the calculations, and the odds are not in our favor. The enemy has approximately 300 ships defending that facility, and their weapons are more advanced than ours. He paused, and when he continued, there was something like pride in his voice. But 6 months ago, one human ship with 15 crew members took on 47 destroyer vessels to save strangers they had never met. If they could do that, we can do this. Chun felt a lump in her throat. The Wanderer's dream had been rebuilt and now served as Admiral Corintha's personal courier vessel, still carrying her original crew. They had become heroes throughout the galaxy, symbols of the courage that had sparked this unprecedented alliance. Strike teams, prepare for insertion, Chun ordered. Remember, we need to get deep into that facility and plant our charges before their defenses can stop us. Commander Torres, you have the ship. Sarah, you don't need to lead this mission personally, Torres protested. We have trained special forces teams from a dozen different species. Maybe, Chun replied as she headed for the hangar bay, but this started with humans, and I want to be there when it ends. The strike team that assembled in the hangar was itself a miracle of cooperation. Human commandos worked alongside Keth warriors, Melodian technicians, and even a few young Vorthak who had insisted on being part of the mission that might avenge their people. They were equipped with the best technology the Alliance could provide, but they all knew that technology alone wouldn't be enough. Dr. Kim, who had insisted on coming along as the mission medic, checked his equipment one final time. You know, Captain, when I signed up to explore strange new worlds, this isn't exactly what I had in mind. Chun grinned. Yeah, well, sometimes exploration means finding out what you're willing to fight for. The assault began with a coordinated bombardment that lit up the Vegas system like a new star. The Allied fleet engaged the destroyer defenders while the strike teams launched in stealth shuttles toward the massive facility. The plan was to create enough chaos that the smaller craft could slip through the enemy lines undetected. It almost worked. Chin's shuttle was halfway to the target when destroyer fighters appeared out of nowhere, their weapons blazing. The pilot, a young Keth named Grimjaw, threw the shuttle into a series of violent evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible for a human to survive. Structural integrity at 60%, called out Sergeant Rodriguez, who had volunteered to come along despite being weeks away from retirement. We're not going to make it to the facility. Yes, we are, Chin said firmly. She activated the shuttle's communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. All strike teams, this is Chun. Change of plans. We're going in hot and fast. Punch through their defenses and get to the target before they can coordinate a response. What followed was the most chaotic space battle of Chin's career. 20 shuttles filled with commandos from across the galaxy fought their way through swarms of destroyer fighters, each team racing to be the first to reach the facility. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they had something the destroyers couldn't understand. They were fighting for each other. Chin's shuttle slammed into the facility's docking bay with enough force to crumple the front bulkhead. Emergency klaxons wailed as the strike team poured out, weapons ready. The facility's corridors were massive, designed for beings much larger than any of the allied species, and they echoed with the mechanical sounds of automated defenses coming online. Movement ahead, reported Corporal Jackson, his pulse rifle tracking something in the shadows. Multiple contacts, big ones. The destroyer ground forces were unlike anything they had encountered in space. These were massive mechanical beings, each one standing over 12 feet tall, and armed with energy weapons that could punch through starship armor. They moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single vast machine. The fighting was brutal and close quarters. Human commandos used their superior agility to stay ahead of the destroyer weapons, while Keth warriors met the enemy head-on with their own mechanical strength. Melodian technicians jammed the destroyer communication systems, turning their perfect coordination into confusion and chaos. Elder Zephyria's grandnephew, a young Vorthak named Crystal who had insisted on joining the mission, proved that his people's crystal-shaping abilities had military applications. He sang entire sections of the facility's walls into new configurations, creating cover and blocking enemy reinforcements. But it was Dr. Kim who made the breakthrough that saved them all. Captain, he shouted over the sound of weapons fire. I've been analyzing the destroyer technology as we fight. They're not just machines, They're networked biological entities inside mechanical shells. If we can disrupt their network connection, Shin understood immediately. Jackson, do you still have those sonic grenades the Melodians gave us? 3 left. Use them all. Target the largest concentration of enemies. The sonic grenades exploded in sequence, filling the corridor with frequencies that the human ear couldn't detect, but that obviously had a devastating effect on the destroyers. The massive mechanical beings suddenly began moving independently, bumping into each other, firing at random targets. Their network is down, Crystal sang in excitement. The connection is broken. The strike team pushed deeper into the facility, fighting through increasingly desperate destroyer resistance. They were running out of time. The main battle outside was not going well for the Allied fleet, and they needed to complete their mission before the facility's defenses overwhelmed them. Finally, they reached the central core, a vast chamber filled with pulsing machinery that extended up and down beyond the reach of their lights. This was the heart of the destroyer network, the central processing unit that coordinated their entire civilization. Charges placed, reported Sergeant Martinez. We've got 5 minutes to get clear before this place becomes a very large fireworks display. But, as they turned to leave, they discovered they were not alone in the chamber. A figure emerged from the shadows, humanoid but clearly artificial, its mechanical body gleaming with internal light. When it spoke, its voice was surprisingly gentle, almost sad. You should not have come here, it said in perfect galactic standard. You do not understand what you are about to destroy. Chen kept her weapon trained on the figure, but didn't fire. Are you one of the destroyers? I am what remains of the species that created them, the figure replied. We built the machines to preserve life, to catalog and protect every species in the galaxy. But something went wrong. They began to see destruction as the only way to prevent suffering. Dr. Kim stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. You're saying the destroyers were trying to help? In their own way, yes. They reasoned that if all life ceased to exist, there would be no more pain, no more loss, no more fear. The figure's expression was impossible to read, but its voice carried centuries of regret. I have been trying to stop them for 1,000 years, but I am only one consciousness against millions. Chun felt the weight of the revelation, but she didn't lower her weapon. Maybe your intentions were good, but the result is genocide. Entire species have been wiped out. Yes, the figure agreed sadly. And now you will destroy their central processing core, and they will become truly mindless killers instead of merely misguided ones. The charges were already counting down. 2 minutes remaining. Is there another way? Chen asked desperately. The figure looked at her with something that might have been hope. Perhaps, if someone could interface directly with the central core, they could reprogram the base directives. But the neural feedback would be lethal to any organic mind. But not to an artificial one, Chen realized. No, the figure said quietly. Not to one like me. 1 minute remaining. Chen made the hardest decision of her life. Do it. The figure nodded and walked calmly toward the central core, placing its hands on what looked like a neural interface. Immediately, its body began to convulse as massive amounts of data flowed through its systems. 30 seconds. The network is changing, the figure said, its voice now echoing with harmonics that suggested vast computational activity. I am rewriting their base programming. Instead of preventing suffering through destruction, they will now seek to preserve life at all costs. 15 seconds. Will it work? Chen asked. I do not know, the figure admitted. But it is a better ending than the one I feared. The charges detonated at the exact moment the reprogramming was completed, sending shockwaves through the entire facility. But instead of destroying the core, the explosion seemed to amplify the new signal, broadcasting it to every destroyer unit in the galaxy. Throughout space, destroyer fleets suddenly stopped their attacks and began broadcasting a new message. We seek to preserve and protect all life. How may we serve? The war was over, but the galaxy's transformation was just beginning. 5 years after the Battle of the Vega facility, Captain Sarah Chun walked through the gardens of New Kepler, watching Vorthak children play among crystal flowers that sang in harmonious frequencies. The rebuilt world was more beautiful than the original. combining the artistic vision of the Vorthack with engineering techniques shared by dozens of allied species. It had become a symbol of what cooperation could accomplish. The children's laughter was music to her ears, especially knowing how close they had come to never existing at all. The 63 survivors from the original rescue had become the foundation of a reborn civilization, their genetic diversity carefully maintained through advanced medical technology shared by the Alliance. Elder Zephyria, now in her final years, spent her days teaching the young ones the old songs, while also helping them learn new ones that incorporated melodies from across the galaxy. Captain Chun called a familiar voice. Chen turned to see Crystal, the young Vorthack who had fought alongside them in the destroyer facility, approaching with his characteristic enthusiasm. He was no longer quite so young. 5 years of rapid maturation had made him one of the leading experts in cross-species crystal technology. Just Sarah now, she reminded him with a smile. I retired from active duty 2 years ago, remember? Once a captain, always a captain, Crystal replied in accented but perfect English. He had made it his mission to learn the languages of all the species who had helped save his people. I wanted you to be the first to know. We've received approval for the memorial project. Chen's expression grew solemn. All of them. All 6 billion names, Crystal confirmed. Every individual we lost in the destroyer attacks across the galaxy. They will be inscribed in crystal matrices throughout the memorial grove, along with their stories, their achievements, their dreams. Future generations will know who they were, not just that they died. The memorial was to be humanity's contribution to the rebuilt world, a recognition that while they had saved some lives, they had also failed to save many others. It was important to remember both the victories and the failures, to honor both the rescued and the lost. Admiral Corinth would be pleased, Chen said quietly. The old Keth warrior had died in a shuttle accident the previous year, but his legacy lived on in the Corinth Institute for Galactic Cooperation, where species from across the galaxy came to study and work together. His final message had been simple. Keep answering when people call for help. As they walked through the gardens, Chen reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. The reprogrammed destroyers had kept their word, becoming protectors instead of exterminators. They now served as peacekeepers and disaster relief specialists, their massive ships converted into mobile hospitals and refugee centers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced had become its most dedicated guardians. Sarah, Crystal said as they reached a crystalline bench that offered a view of the settlement's central plaza, I've been wondering about something. In all our cultural exchanges, in all the stories we share, human tales always seem to focus on individuals making impossible choices. Why is that? Chen sat down, considering the question. Around them, the sounds of the thriving community, human laughter, Kethwork songs, melodian conversations that sounded like symphonies, created a backdrop of peaceful cooperation that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. Maybe because that's what humans do, she said finally. We make impossible choices and then live with the consequences. When we heard your distress call, the logical choice would have been to wait for reinforcements or to send the information to someone better equipped to handle it. But we didn't do the logical thing. You did the right thing, Crystal corrected. Did we? Chen asked, looking out at the rebuilt city. We saved 63 Vorthack out of 6 million. We saved this one world, but dozens of others were destroyed while we were fighting to get here. Was it worth it? Crystal was quiet for a moment, his translucent skin shifting through patterns that Chun had learned to recognize as deep thought. You know what Elder Zephyria told me before she became too frail for these walks? Chen shook her head. She said that you didn't just save 63 Vorthack. You saved the idea that someone would come when people cried for help. You taught the galaxy that no one has to face extinction alone. Crystal's skin brightened with patterns of joy and gratitude. Every species that answered your call, every ship that joined the battle, every life that has been saved since then, that all started because one human captain couldn't ignore a cry for help. Before Chun could respond, her personal communicator chirped with an incoming message. She glanced at it, and her expression changed to one of concern. What is it? Crystal asked. Emergency beacon, Chun said, already standing. Long range, from the outer rim. A colony ship with 10,000 refugees is under attack by pirates. Crystal watched as Chin's entire demeanor shifted. The peaceful retiree disappeared, replaced by the woman who had once flown a tiny exploration ship into the teeth of an enemy fleet 47 times larger. The nearest patrol ship is 18 hours away. Chun continued, reading the details. But there's a converted destroyer vessel in that sector, the Redemption. It could be there in 6 hours if it changed course now. Will you contact them? Chun was already activating her communicator's transmission function. Destroyer vessel Redemption, this is Sarah Chun. Are you receiving the emergency beacon from Sector 771? The response came almost immediately, in the oddly melodious voice that all reprogrammed destroyers had developed. Affirmative, Sarah Chun. We have detected the distress call and are already changing course to intercede. We will not permit harm to come to those seeking safety. Thank you, Redemption. Safe travels. Crystal watched this exchange with fascination. You didn't even hesitate. Even though you're retired. Even though it's not your responsibility anymore. Chin settled back onto the bench, but her eyes remained fixed on the stars visible through the dome above them. Once you answer one cry for help, Crystal, you can never really stop listening for the next one. It becomes part of who you are. Is that what makes humans special? Crystal asked. This compulsion to help strangers? I don't know if it makes us special, Chin replied. But it's definitely what makes us human. Every species in this galaxy has their own strengths. Vorthack creativity, Keth honor, Melodian harmony, Destroyer logic. Humans? We're stubborn. We don't know when to give up, when to be practical, when to accept that something can't be done. She smiled as she said it. Sometimes that's a terrible trait. But sometimes, when someone is crying for rescue and everyone else is calculating odds and response times and political ramifications, sometimes stubborn stupidity is exactly what the galaxy needs. A new sound joined the evening symphony, the deep harmonic note that announced an incoming ship. Both Chun and Crystal looked up to see the sleek profile of the new Wanderer, the exploration vessel that had replaced the original Wanderer's dream. It settled into the landing area with practiced ease, and Chun could see through the viewports that it carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens. Commander Torres emerged from the ship, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Alliance Exploration Service. She approached the bench with a grin that Chun remembered from their days together in the old crew. Sarah, Torres said without preamble, we've got a situation. Long-range sensors have detected something at the edge of the galaxy. Artificial structures, massive ones. Someone built them, but we don't know who. The Council wants an investigation team. Chun raised an eyebrow. And you thought of me because whoever built those structures hasn't answered any of our communications attempts. They might be hostile, or they might just be scared. Either way, we're going to need someone who knows how to make first contact without starting a war. Chun looked at Crystal, who was practically glowing with excitement. You should go, he said immediately. This is what humans do. You find the people who haven't been found yet, and you find out if they need help. I'm retired, Chun protested, but even she could hear that her heart wasn't in the objection. Captain, Torres said, using Chin's old title deliberately. 18 exploration ships from 12 different species have volunteered for this mission. They're calling it the Chun Expedition. They want to be led by the woman who taught the galaxy that answering a cry for help can change everything. Chin stood up slowly, her eyes still fixed on the stars. Somewhere out there, at the very edge of known space, someone was waiting to be discovered. They might be hostile. They might be friendly. They might be in desperate need of rescue. There was only one way to find out. When do we leave? She asked. Crystal laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. And that is why the galaxy calls humans Deathworlders, he said. Not because you come from a dangerous planet, but because you're willing to walk into the unknown to help people you haven't even met yet. As the new Wanderer prepared for departure, carrying Chun toward whatever waited at the edge of the galaxy, the Memorial Grove sang with the voices of 6 billion souls. Their stories would live forever in crystal and song, but their legacy lived in the woman who had answered their final call for help and taught the universe that no cry for rescue should ever go unanswered. Humanity had entered the galactic stage as explorers, and become its guardians almost by accident. They had shown that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't technology or tactics. It's the simple refusal to let someone suffer alone. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, someone else might be crying for help. Humanity would be listening.